Well, this is a work in progress, but we're getting better and better. It will get worse. I have to give it fingers.
Oh God.
I might mocap it. I mean, we might just have Reese wear some equipment and live his best life. So,
Don't give it consciousness.
yeah, upload your consciousness to the monkey. So, last class we talked about some basic features in VR. We made a gun that shoots and something that teleports. Let me make sure it still works. Oh my God. All right. Okay. So I can shoot stuff. I can shoot these baby carrots, and they hit the blocks. And I can also hit the trigger. This is very loose. I can hit the trigger to teleport. And if you recall, I can keep myself out of the floor by constraining the Z, which in Unreal is height, in Unity it would be Y. And I can keep myself away from walls by using the navigation mesh to tell me which areas are safe. Generally, you want to interpolate and stuff like that to make the locomotion a little bit better, but that's not that important right now. Today, we'll be talking about a bunch of different ways to grab things. And you're probably wondering, why does it matter? Why do we have to talk about different ways of grabbing things? The reason is because grabbing will be a really good way of showing you a bunch of methods that are really important in VR, such as Spherecasting and some other stuff. The stuff that we talk about today, the implementation is quite a bit different between Unity and Unreal, because Unity doesn't actually have attachment functions that I know of. You have to do things through a parenting structure. So the high-level logic should hopefully make sense, but in implementation, you might find it a little bit harder in Unity, and so you should post on Piazza and stuff like that if you have questions about how to do it in Unity. And I'll try to mention ways of doing it in Unity as I do this. But let's make our first feature. I added some inputs, or I changed the inputs around. So we had the shoot gun and go to their input. I added some other buttons that do stuff. So they already had grab left and grab right, which is this button, which would be like RB on a controller. I added some other buttons like, we'll talk about this, but I made it so that A, which is this, is something else, B is another thing, and we'll do magnetic grip, which is going to be tapping in on the thumbstick. I think that Xbox calls it RS, and PS3 and PS4 call it R3, but it's the same idea, you just click in on the thumbstick. So I have a little lesson plan. First, we're going to make it so that I can put my hand inside of a cube, hit the grip button, and then I'll grab it. And this is relatively simple to do because we learned collision boxes. So here's the code that we made last time. This is the gun shooting code, and there's teleportation code. We're going to add a function that handles that grip. So it was called grab right, and this will get called when I hit that key. And to figure out what I'm grabbing at any given time, I can use overlaps, or in Unity they're called triggers. In Unreal, since Unreal is the physicsy engine, it actually keeps track of everything that you're overlapping with at any given time. In Unity, you have to do that yourself with physics.overlapsphere. But the point is that we can say, right-click, thank you, get all overlapping actors, or get overlapping actors. There's this function, and the cone that was on my right hand, I renamed to right mesh so that it's not just cone 1, cone 2. I want to know all of the actors that overlap with the right mesh. Make sense? And I actually, throughout this lecture, we're going to assume that we can only grab these blue cubes, which, if you recall, are of this type BP pickup cube. You can see types in Unreal, and in Unity, you would just cast it down to one of its scripts. So I only want to pick up these things, BP pickup cube, and since these cubes can't intersect with each other because they're physics objects, technically I should only be able to overlap with one at a time, if that makes sense. So I can safely assume that if I get the first index, that will be probably the one that my hand's actually on. It might not be, like maybe I'm intersecting between two cubes. There are weird edge cases like that, but let's not worry about that. So here's where things get whack. First of all, I want to make sure that I'm actually overlapping with something, so I can test the length of this array and make sure that it's greater than 0. This is just to avoid null pointer errors. Makes sense? If you don't know how to implement something in Unity, let me know. And I'll try to tell you the Unity way of doing it. But hopefully this makes sense. I'm just making sure that there is in fact an overlapping actor. And where things change quite a bit in Unreal is that Unreal has this function called attach to, which literally just teleports the thing that you're trying to attach to your hand or something. In Unity, the way you do it is reparent something and then play around with its relative transform. So it's a little bit harder. But at a high level, this is fine. So what I want to do is attach whatever I'm trying to grab to my hand. And the attach function has a couple of parameters. The target, which is the thing that I want to attach to my hand, which is just the cube. The parents will be this right mesh. And there are a couple of rules here. I'm going to not change any, well, I'm only going to change keep world. Keep relative, I don't know why it's the default, but what it does is kind of weird. So these cubes have, for example, say that I did keep relative for scale. These cubes have a scale of 0.2. So what it will do is if you attach it to something that is also scaled, like my mesh is scaled by some amount, what it will do is keep the relative scale to be 0.2. And if you remember what happens, if you remember how to get from local to world transform, you multiply them. So this will actually shrink the object. So I'm going to say keep world, which will just keep it to be this exact size. I'm going to keep its rotation and stuff the same way for the same reason. We'll see what weld simulated bodies does in a second. So when I grab the button, or when I hit the button, I can go grab stuff. Unfortunately, I have a teleportation function now. Oh god. Track. Pew. But I can't let it go, because I didn't handle let it go. But I can attach myself to it. It's stuck. So how do I let something go? Well, again, in Unity you do this with parenting and stuff, but let's just assume the high level, you want to detach it somehow. Fortunately, Unreal has something called detach actor, but I need to know what I actually grabbed. So I want to save a reference to the thing that I grabbed, so that later on, if I let go, you know, I actually have a reference to it. Because I don't want to do get overlapping actors every time. It's a kind of slow function. So let's say I make a variable that's thing I grabbed. It's going to be this pickup cube. In order to set it to be, well, I want to set it to be the thing that I actually grabbed, which is this. This, I think, is of type actor. Yeah. In Blueprint, if you hover over a node, you can see what type something is. I'm going to do our good old strategy of casting it to a BP cube. Because I filtered it to only be these cubes, this is a pretty safe thing to do. I'm going to cast it, and I'm going to set it to be this. So now this variable is saving the thing that I actually grabbed. So when I release, I can do things like, first of all, make sure that I actually grab something, because you can hit the button and release when you're not actually grabbing something. So I want to make sure that this is a thing. I want to make sure it's not null. In Blueprint, if you do a comparison between pointers and you just don't give it a second value, it just checks if it's null. Makes sense? So this is just saying this is just null. So if there is in fact something that I grabbed, what I want to do is just detach it. See, nice and simple. And I just want to keep its position, so wherever I let it go, that's where it's going to actually release. Can you anticipate what will happen when I do this? You want to look ahead? Look into the future. So I'll do this. I'll let it go. This is what weld simulated bodies does. And in Unity, weld simulated bodies is really important in game development, because basically if I try to grab something but it still has physics, it's going to do really weird interpolation stuff. Like it's going to try to fall due to gravity, but you know, I'm also trying to grab it, so it'll like bounce around. It'll do weird stuff. So weld simulated bodies is a useful thing, but what I want to happen is when I let it go, I want it to do physics again. Do physics. So I can say simulate physics. I'm just going to tell it to simulate physics again when I let it go. Also, I want to set this pointer to be null, because once I let it go, I'm not grabbing it anymore. Makes sense? And the same way that when you do comparisons, if you don't put anything there, it's null. It's the same for when you set a pointer in Blueprint. This is a technicality of Blueprint, so don't worry about it if you're working in Unity. In Unity, you have to do just like your typical null checking like you do in Java or something. So, teleport, grab. It preserves momentum. So, yay, I can do this now. So that's the most simple way to grab something, to just put your hand into it and grab it. But let's say that I want some higher IQ version where I can point to something, say I want to grab that, and then pick it up. That would be pretty cool, right? That's what you'll have to do for A4. So it is pretty cool. At least it will be pretty cool because you have to do it anyway. So one of the functions that I did, I made two versions. I'll show you what happens when you don't snap it and when you snap it. I made A, the no snap version. So it doesn't matter because I already abstracted what it's called. So no snap. So we have raycasts. And so the same way that you point to something and teleport there, that's how we can also figure out, to pick up an object. So I'll do my line trace again. I can't spell. Line trace. I'm gonna start here. Get world translocation. So something that's neat about Blueprint, I guess. Not that I'm paid by Epic Games to say this, but the actual computations are the same as when I teleport, because I'm actually using the same hand and I'm using the pointer values and stuff like that, and I'm doing all this vector math. I can actually just kind of borrow this code. So I'll bring this down here, and I'm going to use it because I'm lazy and I don't want to write it again. So it's going to come from the right controller's location, and I can add the right controller's location plus some direction to get a point that's in that direction. And so I'm just going to borrow this code. Yay. I only want it to respond to physics bodies. In Unreal, at least, if you want to see what type something is, you can click it, go down to its collision settings, and see that it's a physics body here. I'm also recording this if you want to see this later. What else do I need to give it? I don't need to give it anything, but I want to show you that it's actually colliding things. So I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna go. What the hell? Over here. Pew, 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 pew. So you can see it's actually only colliding with these physics objects. It's not going to respond to things that are not physics objects. So those red squares tell me where it's actually hitting. So now I can do some cool stuff. I can still use my attachment function. So I'm going to still attach it, and I'm going to do this cast and everything. Honestly, everything works pretty much the same way. So I'm just going to copy this. What I want to attach is the thing that I hit. So remember, Unity and Unreal both give you some collision object, or in Unreal it's called hit, that has information about what it hit, where it hit, and so on. So I want to attach the thing that I hit to my hand. I'm going to tell it to keep its, I'm going to tell it to stay where it is. And in order to do this, I want to be able to drop it, so I still need to save what I grabbed. Does that make sense? And I guess I could smash all the buttons at the same exact time, but let's not worry about that. So, oh my god, tracking lost. Whatever. Q. This is what happens if I keep the world location. It is attached to my hand, like it follows my hand, but it didn't actually snap to my hand location, so I can do this. But I can't let it go because I still didn't do that logic. Makes sense. Like I didn't do the let go logic. Fortunately, because I'm saving the thing that I grabbed to the same pointer variable, I can also just steal this logic, because we're programmers and we steal code all the time, including our own. So when I release the button, I want it to do the same thing, basically. detach itself and resimulate physics. Oh my god, I'd probably have to restart the Oculus. But anyway, I can let go of it now. Oh god. I can do this with anything. So that's one way to do it. That's what happens when you don't snap it. I'm going to restart the Oculus quickly, but we can still move on with the lecture. Restart. I don't know why it does that tracking loss thing. It's weird. Anyway, I can. So I have this, and I have another thing that gets pressed, or that happens when I hit B, and I want it to do basically the same thing. So shoot. Wait, what is it called? Shoot and grab, no snap. Shoot. Oh my god. Shoot and grab. This screen is so like, it's tiny, it's not at the right aspect ratio, and it's low resolution. It's great. So if I'm not snapping it, I'm actually only changing this parameter. Does that make sense? I'm only changing whether it's keeping the world position. So I can reuse this code. And the only difference between both versions of the code is which key I pressed. Make sense? So I can save which key I pressed. I can say key I pressed. And at least in Unreal, they'll actually just return it to you. This key object that has like what its hardware ID is, what its name is, and stuff like that. I'm gonna make it a key. And yeah, this is what I'm gonna set every time I press something. So when I press the A button, I just want it to save it as A. And when I press this thing, I want it to save as whatever this is. I think it was B. And so the let go logic will still be the same, so I can again just steal the code that I made before. See, this is still the let go logic. Like if I'm grabbing something, I detach it and so on. So now I know what key I pressed, and I can use that to parameterize these. In Unity and Unreal, you would have a select statement like this, which selects one of the options. It's kind of like a ternary operator. Do you remember those? Like you can say if condition question mark, if that condition is true, colon, if it's false. You know, that's kind of what a select statement is like. So it has a couple options. I want whatever its return value to control these. And let's see. What actually indicates which one I select is the key that I pressed. Now, unfortunately, with Oculus, like you can't just do Oculus Touch, whatever. I also don't know if I spelled it right, but I did. Anyway, the key object has a name, and I already saved in a different variable just for convenience what it's actually called. It's the same as this right here. Yeah. So I'm going to compare it, and I'm going to see, is it that key? So if the key that I pressed is equal to A, which is this one, see, I just saved it as a variable because I didn't want to write it out. If it is this, if I hit A, then I want to do what I just did, which was kind of like, you know, that. Like I can magically control it with the force. In that case, I keep world. Otherwise, I want it to snap, which will teleport it to my hand. So since I did that, I can just save all this logic. If I hit B, I still want it to do the line trace and figure out what I hit and so on. I just want it to behave differently when I actually grab something. So Oculus, confirm Guardian, Oculus link. By the way, people on laptops might not be able to use Oculus Link. If you find that your development process is really slow because you have to keep building it, the Vive might be a better option, because I think the Vive works on most laptops, but the Quest doesn't. Like you basically need a dedicated laptop GPU, not Intel HD graphics, to get the link to work correctly. Anyway, so what was it? B. So B still shoots rays, but when I hit something, Oh, I did. Oh, I flipped the buttons, but okay, I flipped it on accident. So A is actually the one that's snapping things. But the point is that I share logic, and basically both buttons they're doing the same logic, but they're parameterized differently. So B is doing this thing. Bam. A does this. See? Does everyone understand what's happening? Anyone super confused? All right. So through a bunch of null pointer references, you'll get used to these. The reason that it threw them is probably because I actually don't know why I threw them. I closed that too quickly, but we'll worry about it later. Remember, Blueprint and C# eat errors, so I'm not going to worry about it. It didn't break my game. I'll fix it later when I can click it fast enough. What was I doing? What was my lesson plan? Oh yeah, okay, so we did these first two. Now I'm going to show you magnetic grip. Magnetic grip is pretty cool. I made magnetic grip R3. I called it magnetic grip. And so we have regular ray casting, where we shoot a ray at something and we figure out what it hits. There are a lot of other types of traces, though. It doesn't necessarily need to be a ray. So we have this really handy thing called a Spherecast, which will shoot a sphere out and figure out what hits it. You know, so you don't have to point at something; it'll just pick up something arbitrary. So Unity and Unreal both have something called this. Unreal calls it sphere trace. So it basically works the same way as a ray trace. The only difference is that I don't remember if this is a technicality that also exists in Unity, but what it does basically is it takes a sphere, it moves it a little bit, and figures out what it hit. So it's not actually just like give it a position to put the sphere and then radiate. It's moving a sphere. So if you give it the same, the point is the parameters are weird. So start is where the first sphere will be, and end will be where it moves the sphere. But I kind of just want it to be in one place. So I have a cool little trick I'll show you. First of all, I'm going to steal my code again. Look at that. Look at all the noodles. The start is going to be the same. It's just going to be wherever my controller is. The end, because of this thing where like the sphere needs to move a little bit for it to do anything, I'm going to add a very tiny amount to it. I'm going to make it move up a really small amount. And this will be my end position. Makes sense? I still need to give the sphere a radius. I'll say like I want to grab things within a 1 meter radius. Is everybody good at a high level about what's happening? I basically want to hit a button, shoot a sphere out, and figure out what it hits. So press this. By the way, the release will still be the same. Like whenever I release the button, I always want to let go of the object. So I can keep borrowing this code. I should probably compress it into a function or something. Where is it? The noodles. Blueprint has this nifty thing where you can actually highlight a bunch of nodes, right-click them, and collapse to function, and it'll create a function for you. So I'm going to call this function letGo. See? So now I can find it more easily because it's just letGo. A bunch of things are letting go of things the same way. So anyway, I'm going to keep drawing my sphere, and I still want it to only grab physics things. Look at all the noodles. We'll see what happens. Please don't lose tracking. It did lose tracking, but it's not doing anything. Oh. Find my guardian. Oh my god. Whatever. Stationary boundary. Alright. Look. Q. It shot a sphere, and it's going to return the first point that it hits, which has really strange repercussions, which we'll deal with in a second. But you see, it just gives me the first thing that it hit, and it's kind of hard to tell what it hits and why. Like say I want to click this thing. That's not where it's hitting. It's hitting like one of these things, or it's hitting over there. But you can see the spheres, right? Like, see? These are the spheres that I shot. But for now, let's ignore that and say I want to grab the first thing I hit, no matter what. I'll steal my code again. Steal code. I'm not going to worry about having it snap versus not snap. I'm just going to assume that it's going to snap. So it's going to teleport to my hand. I want the thing that I hit to snap to my hand. Oh, whoops, snap to my hand. Keep world, keep world. I want to verify that it's a cube first this time. That was probably the safer thing to do. So if it's a cube, then it will actually attach it. See, look at all the noodles. All right, makes sense. It's kind of the same, except I'm shooting a sphere instead of a ray, so I actually don't need to point at what I want to collect. Enable Oculus Quest. Link. Q. Where is it shooting? Oh, I didn't filter it, I don't think. Or did I? Did I forget something? Snap to target. Oh. But we have our good old strategy here of text renders and 3D texts on my face. Look at that. What I want to do is print what I actually hit. So set text. I want to set it to be the thing that I hit. Get display name. Oh, I didn't give it a parent. That's why. I didn't tell it that it actually has to snap to the right mesh. So it's just not doing anything at all. I'm surprised it didn't throw a null pointer reference. This is the consequence of programming languages eating errors unexpectedly instead of just crashing. Anyway. Oh my god, tracking lost again. Whatever. Phew. So, I can't move it. Anyway, if I hit this, I want to collect the nearest thing, but it's not doing that. It's kind of just giving me whatever it finds. You can see the red squares that say what it found, and it's not what I want. I want it to give me the closest object. Does that make sense? So, raycasts have a couple of different versions. There is this version, which will give me the first thing it hits, but it also has versions that will give me everything that it hits at all. So in Unity, it's the same thing. So I have multi-sphere trace, which will give me absolutely everything that it hits. Same parameters. More noodles. Same object types. Same radius. And this thing. And what this will return to me is, instead of returning a single hit, it returns an array of all the things that I hit and where I hit them. So what this means is that if I just get the first hit, this will have the same effect as what I just did. It'll just snap the very first thing I hit. But I actually want it to give me the closest thing. So I can create a function for this that's like a grab or get closest hits object. It'll take in all of the things that I hits. It'll take in an array of hits. And I'm just going to make a short little minimizer function. I'm also going to return a BP pickup cube so that I can pick up the closest thing. Did I spell it wrong? BP. Though I can't see. I want it to return a single object. So let's just say for a naive minimizer function, I have the closest distance. I have to give it an initial value, so I'm just going to give it some, oh, I missed. I need to give it an initial value. So because it's a minimizer, if I give it a really, really high value, then literally anything will be closer than that for the very first iteration. Makes sense? I mean, you probably have had to do a function like this in 401 or something like that. It's a very common thing to do. I'm also going to keep track of what the closest object is. Closest object so far. Oh boy. Far. It's a BP pickup cube. All right, so to minimize to get the closest hit, what I can do is a for each loop. So for each element of the hits array, I have a hit and stuff like that. So each hit will have, the same information, what I hit, where it is, and so on. I want the closest object. So what I want to say is, first of all, I'm going to cast it to make sure I'm actually hitting pickup cubes. Let's do BP. I think that the pickup cubes are the only physics objects in the scene, so it'll always be that, but let's just assume it's not. So I'll do this, and what I want to say is I want the closest cube, so for any cube I can get its location, and I want the thing that's closest to my hand. Do you remember your vector math? How do I get the distance between two objects given where they are? Just Euclidean distance. So if you subtract the vectors, it will give you a vector that goes from one to the other. And if you get the length of that, it will give you the distance between two things. Make sense? So if this is less than the closest distance, then I'm going to use this instead. Let's see. If this is closer, then this is what is the closest distance, and I'm going to save the object that actually generated that. So I'm going to also save this pointer because I casted it. So whenever I get a closer object, that's the one that I'm going to save as the closest one. So after the loop is complete, I'll just return it. Do you follow the general logic so far? Is it more or less fine? I'm just trying to find the closest object of all the things that I could have hit with that sphere. So I can use that function to my advantage. Instead of, this is magnetic grip. Instead of just attaching the first thing, what I want to do instead, I'm not going to do this anymore. What I want to do instead is call this function that I made, which will take in all these hits. I missed. And it's going to return to me what the nearest object is. Makes sense? I should have named it something different. Let's say nearest. And this is what I'll use instead. I also have to snap it. So, what is this complaining about? Oh, this is already of type pickup cube, so casting it is not actually going to do anything. But I don't feel like fixing it. I could have just deleted that node, but I would have to fix something else. Anyway, still not tracking probably. Oh wait, no, it tracked again. Thanks, Oculus. So I could do this. Give me the closest cube. See, it hit all of these cubes, but my function returns what the nearest one is. So I could grab only this one, bam. Grab only this one, bam. And I also have my other methods of grabbing things. See? Other button is this one. Sweep. Yay. All right. All good so far? High level, what's happening? It actually, so again, if you think of each node as a line of code, it's actually not that much code to get this working. It's just the logic of how do you handle collisions and when is weird if you've never done game development before. But yeah, it's actually not that much code, and when you do A5 and A4, you'll realize that you could do it with only a few lines of code. What else is on my lesson plan? Allow me to shoot the thing I grabbed. Yeah, this will be cool. So when I let go, so what this means is I want to do something interesting. I want to pick up the cube that I grabbed, put it on my gun, and have the gun shoot it. Make sense? I want that to be my new bullet. So when I let go of the cube, if there is something that I'm grabbing right now, what I want to do is check the collision between the thing that I'm grabbing and the tip of the gun. The tip of the gun is this left cone object, and it's set to overlap. So what I could do is, if I can make another if statement that says if the thing that I grabbed, you can do this, is overlapping something. I don't know, in Unity it's a little bit harder, but Unreal has these specific functions where you can figure out, is something overlapping with a very specific component. So I want to see, is something overlapping with the left cone? The other thing would be this thing that I'm grabbing. If it is, then I'm going to attach it to the tip of the gun and then shoot it. So if I'm not grabbing anything, then I don't do anything. If nothing is overlapping, so if this returns false, it means that I'm not actually putting that thing on my gun. So when that happens, I'm just going to drop it the old-fashioned way. But if it is, then I want to attach it. So I could say attach to, or wait, the thing that I grab, I want to attach to our grade attachment functions. So I want to attach this to the tip of my gun. Snap things the normal way. The parent is going to be this. And I need to make sure that the thing that I grabbed is still null because I'm not grabbing it anymore. But maybe what I want to do is, we'll see, one thing at a time. As you'll see in a second, in order to shoot it, I need to actually keep track of what it is. Oculus tracking. Pew, pew, pew. What was I doing? Oh yeah, I need 2 hands now. So I have my cool gun that shoots baby carrots. I'm gonna grab this and put it over here and let it go. See? Bam. But I wanted to shoot the cube, not these baby carrots. And also, the reason that the physics is so janky is because the cube is actually still has a collision box. So when they spawn, they're inside and they're just kind of getting shot out. So I need to keep track of what I'm grabbing. Or not what I'm grabbing, but what's on the gun. So kind of like how I'm keeping track of this, I can say thing on gun. I can set this to be sets thing on gun. I want the thing that I was grabbing to be this now. And then I'm going to set this to be null. Okay, the screen shut off. All right. And now when I shoot stuff, I can figure out, like, should I shoot the cube that's on the gun or should I shoot a bullet? And I can handle that where I was shooting stuff. So here I'm spawning the bullet, but I want a different condition. I want to say if there is in fact something on the gun, sets, or it's not equal to null. If there is something on the gun, well, if there's not something on the gun, then I'm going to shoot a bullet. Otherwise, I'm going to shoot this thing. So what I need to do is detach it from the gun. Otherwise, it's going to be parented and it's going to make things really janky. I want it to just keep its position. I'm going to add impulse to that instead of, what I was adding impulse to with the same parameter. So I'm just, instead of adding the impulse to the bullet, I'm adding the impulse to the cube. I'm also releasing it so that, I let it go and then I shoot it out. And finally, I want to set this thing to be null so that if, once I shoot something, I don't have it anymore. Actually, I'll show you what happens if I don't do that. What did I forget? I forgot what to add the impulse to. This thing. So, oh my god. All right, still have my gun. I'm gonna put this here. I'm gonna shoot it. I didn't tell it to simulate physics again, so it didn't actually do anything. So, as same reason that we have to set set physics to be, working again after I let go of something. So set simulate physics. True. Otherwise, if I add impulse, it's just not going to do anything. PC disconnected. Great. Ow. I didn't adjust this very well, so it's hard. All right. Q. Grab this. Put it on my gun. Q. But if I don't remove the reference, what'll happen is this. I can shoot it, and it'll stop. But since I didn't remove that reference, it's going to keep trying to shoot it. See? Which might be cool. I mean, you can possess things that way. But I don't want it to do that. I want to, after I shoot the cube, I want it to, I want to shoot bullets again. Pew, pew, pew. Oh my god, every time you put the Oculus on, it decides to recalculate the Guardian. All right, so release, shoot. Pew, pew, pew. Yay. There is something kind of whack, which is that I didn't handle what happens if I keep adding them to the gun. So I can still do that. It's just a check for nullity. So whenever I'm attaching it to the gun, I want to make sure that that thing is not already there. So when I let go, if I want to put something on the gun, then if there is already something there, then I want to release it and then put the new thing on. So if this is not equal to null, if the thing on the gun is null, then that means I don't already have anything on the gun. If there is something, then that means that I need to detach it first. I need to release the old one. Keep world, and tell to simulate physics. Set simulate physics. And then I'll do all the attachment stuff. The noodles are getting really confusing, but if you look at the video again later, I think it'll hopefully make more sense. All right. Oh yeah, I forgot I have this neat function, so I don't have to do that. Oh, wrong button. Pew. Pop. Pop. Yay. I have a very interesting gun now. All right. That is the basic logic. I still have runtime errors because somewhere I'm not checking nullity, which is fine. I mean, you will, but thankfully it's eating the errors. If you did this in C++, it would just straight up crash. If you did this in Unity, it wouldn't crash, but it would still throw errors the same way. It just eats the errors. But does the logic make sense? Like how spherecasting works, multi-spherecasting, and so on. All right, we have 6 minutes, so I'm going to show you how to do A4 kind of. Well, is anybody still having trouble with A3? And need a hint or something? No, you're good. Right, keep this open. All right, so if you looked at an important thing. I was trying to color Reese. That's why I had this open. Unless there are any complaints, what I think I'm going to do for the syllabus is remove the clause that says that after more than 2 weeks, it's going to just be unacceptable. I'm going to say that if you don't have any late days and you submit it more than 1 week later, the highest you can get is 50% instead of 0. Does that make sense? So no matter how late you submit it, you can still get 50%. Makes sense? Anybody against that? No, not even Reese. He's the troublemaker. All right, A4, in A4, assignments 4. So A4's instructions are pretty simple, but for the coding part, what you'll be doing is making so that you can pick up an arbitrary number of collectibles, right? So, and A5 will also be kind of complex. We might just do this on Monday, but just to give you a hint, in Unreal and Unity, you can save a class instead of a specific object. In Unity, since Unity is not really object-oriented, it doesn't have classes, but it does have these things called prefabs, which are objects that basically exist somewhere, like you know what they look like. It's like a prototype in Java, like you know what they look like, but they don't have to strictly adhere to that. As of Unity 2018, they have these things called prefab variants, which are like subclasses of a prefab. So for example, if you wanted to make a prefab of a collectible object, you can make prefab variants that are like coin, treasure box, things like that. And so that's a modular way of doing it in Unity without the object-oriented features. In Unreal, so okay, let me create I have a few minutes. Let's say that I add an inventory. Oh, I already created an inventory. So you have this inventory, and what you could possibly do is this. So instead of storing actual pointers to the objects, you can store the class of that object and how many of each thing you have. Does that make sense? So like, instead of pointers, what you have instead are like, you could say, I have a collectible. I don't have a collectible object, but say you had a collectible, or you had a subclass of a collectible like a coin. You could say, I have a coin, and I know how many of coins I have. Does that make sense logically? I mean, that's just a modular way of doing it. Because what you're going to have to do is delete the objects once you collect them, which means the pointer to that exact object will be dead as soon as you destroy it. So you need to somehow store the definition of that object. Does that all make sense? It's just object-oriented programming. But I don't know. If you have questions, I don't know, come to office hours. Assignment 4, I mean, a lot of people have been doing things at the very, very last minute. Assignment 4, that's probably okay. Assignment 5 is going to be the first VR assignment. You're going to be very, very sorry, especially in Unity, if you do that at the last minute. Because what we talked about today, the spherecasting and stuff, is much, much harder in Unity. Because Unity doesn't actually have attachment functions. You need to reparent something and then change its transformation relative to the parent. Like if I want to snap something in Unity, what I would do is say that the controller is the parent of this object, and then I would set its relative transform to be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Or I mean the scale would be whatever it was before. But does that make sense? I don't think Unity has an actual attachment function, and it doesn't have snapping or anything like that. So you have to handle that yourself. Makes sense? All right, well, it's 4:49. Bye. I'm gonna put the video up so you can see